Another edition here of Getting There with Goss, talking about the career journeys of media members, coaches, athletes, and business owners. This guy's a media member, Jack Lamson, CBS 6. You see him here in the Capital Region. Jack, let's start way back when. Where'd you grow up in 6, 7, 8 years old? What'd you want to be as a kid? And was it that same dream job you wanted when you were 18 years old?
So I grew up about 45 minutes north of Boston, a little town called Amesbury. Most people know our next door neighbor is Newburyport. It's our high school rival. They're the ones right on the ocean. We're the ones inland with all the old carriage factories and things like that aren't quite as exciting, but now have turned into breweries and cool artist spaces and things like that. So it's right at the end of 495, right on the New Hampshire border. Cool little town. And when I was that young, I think I always sort of said that I wanted to be I think I said I wanted to be a businessman, without knowing exactly what kind of business I wanted to do or anything like that. But if you ask my parents, they knew that I wanted to get into something speaking, right from the get-go. They said that I wouldn't shut up. For anybody familiar with the area between the North Shore of Massachusetts and Boston, you ride right down Route 1, and it's sort of restaurants and strip malls and all that stuff in between there in Boston on 95 and Route 1. And, I used to just sit in the back seat when I was a kid and just read every single sign. And my parents used to be like, please stop reading everything. Because after, the half an hour drive, it got very old. By the time I was 18, somewhere in between there, middle school, high school, I definitely started leaning toward broadcasting, whether it was sports, whether it was news. I knew that I wanted to present, I knew that I wanted to tell stories, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So by the time I was 18, I was very fortunate in that when I was looking at colleges, I knew exactly what I wanted to look at. And I was all focused 100% on communication schools.
This is the first time, by the way, that an out-of-state person out of New York, where we're taping this, where we're both living right now, that I have this connection to your rival high school. Because when I hear Newburyport, I think of two people. I think of West Newburyport is the home of John Cena, if I'm not mistaken. And then is Newburyport High School nicknamed the Clippers? Because
they are.
I had a roommate, Kevin Ryan, who I believe went to Newburyport High School, who played for the Clippers. So there you go. We have the double connection to their rival, which is the first time that's happened. So I bring that up because where you grew up, even though you talked about this, broadcasting is what you want to do when you're in high school. The area you grow up in is a crazy sports town. Like that area you're in, people love all different types of sports in that spot in Massachusetts.
Yeah, absolutely. The John Cena thing is sort of like an urban legend. Or almost like I don't know how much of it is actually true and how much of it was just passed down through generations. Because we had a Gold's Gym, the precursor to a Planet Fitness kind of thing, and then we had I don't even know the name of it. We had another gym right in downtown that was the serious weightlifting gym, and it was in downtown Amesbury. And it was if you went in there, you were going in there to bench and to deadlift and things like that. And it was and there were always rumors that John Cena was there. And I, like I said, I don't know how true it actually was. I never went in there. But it was sort of a, not an unspoken thing, but just sort of like a whispered thing around town. Hey, John Cena might be around somewhere. And I never ran into him, but yeah, I know he's from the area. And, he's definitely made a couple of trips back before, too. I didn't actually go to Amesbury High, but I went to a private school nearby. And but I still have that venom for Newburyport for sure.
By the way, John Cena is the Bigfoot, the Loch Ness monster of that area, I guess we'll call it there. So you mentioned, by the way, you want to go to a broadcasting school. Kind of take us through the idea of the application process of where you're applying and why eventually you decide on what becomes the college you go to for 4 years.
So I applied to Quinnipiac was great because they had rolling admission. So I applied there early on. And I got in, and I sort of tucked it in the back of my pocket like a little ace in the hole kind of thing. And I said, well, let's see what else is out there. I got into Fairfield, was really impressed with their program. I got into Ithaca. I got into American University. Syracuse sent me a letter that said, "Dear Jack, thanks, but no thanks. LOL, Syracuse." I went there and I know that there are a lot of Syracuse grads in the area, and I like giving them a little rib. It's like, "Ooh, you went to Syracuse? Wow, tell me more about it." It's like, how do you know? You're talking to a Syracuse grad because they say they're a Syracuse grad in the first 5 minutes. Same for Medill, same for Northwestern, all that kind of stuff. So I get a kick out of that, but that's only because I'm a little bitter and jaded because I didn't get in. But for example, when I went to Syracuse, and I don't know if it's changed at all, but when I went, they said, all right, freshmen run the lighting board, sophomores run the sound board, juniors get to report in the field, seniors get to anchor. And I was like, oh, that doesn't really sound all that appealing. And they told me, if you're really serious about it, you have to apply directly to Newhouse. You could probably, when I met with the counselor, he said, with your grades and extracurriculars, your application, you could probably get into Syracuse, no problem. But then you'd have to reapply to Newhouse. And I said, well, I don't really want to go through this entire process again. Let me just, shoot for the moon, apply directly to Newhouse. And they weren't into me, but it was a fun process. It was, like I said, I was blessed. It was beneficial that I knew exactly what I wanted to do, because when I went into these schools, I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I wanted. Even if I didn't know exactly what kind of presenting or news or reporting I wanted to do, I knew that I wanted somebody that had a good studio. And to Quinnipiac's credit, they said, well, yeah, we have a whole bunch of freshmen who have their own show. And so I started as a camera op on a show called The Morning After, TMA, on Wednesday mornings. I believe we ran TMA. And I started as a camera op, and the host was a great guy by the name of Anthony Filiacci. He's a senior producer for CBS News now. And he, at one point, we just got to talking. I think he was a junior at the time. And he was like, "Hey, let's get Jack on camera." He goes, let's do a segment with Jack the cameraman, JTC. Let's get JTC on here." So they did dating advice with Jack the cameraman. The first time I did it was Valentine's Day weekend of my freshman year, and I don't know shit about dating advice, but they stuck me on there and asked like, "Oh, you're out on a date, this happens, what do you do, JTC?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I had a girlfriend for 2 years in high school, and then I had a different girlfriend for another year and a half in high school. So it wasn't exactly playing the field. My wife and I had been together for 13, 14 years now. We met as freshmen in college and got married. So, I wasn't exactly the pinnacle of dating advice, but
Wait, I don't mean to cut you off because the timeline here is not match up. So is this how she found out about you? Because you said freshman, you meet at college, and this is your freshman year. Is this what Valentine's Day, we're getting deeper into the semesters, was this the moment where she said, "I see JTC, the behind the scenes guy making his debut. That's the man I want for the rest of my life"? I'm
pretty sure that she either never watched, or if she watched, she was like, "He's full of it." So I don't think that had any influence on her decision to date me at that point, and then Lord knows why she stuck with me. But yeah, it and then it evolved from there. I wound up becoming the host. So I wound up hosting my own weekly show as a sophomore. Filiacci, to his credit, he was graduating or moving on, and he said, "I want you to be the heir apparent. You take over for TMA." And I did it for the next 3 years. And it was a great introduction to, we had a really, really rough rundown, just like here are the topics we're going to touch on. We had a weather guy, and this was all live on Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. or something like that. So trying to get people to get out of their beds at 8 o'clock to come in and work it, let alone watch it, in college was a fun experience.
Well, that last part in particular, talking about people getting up and needing to do different things to watch it or be a part of it. You have this interesting background that I'm learning about for the first time now, that I think a lot of either young broadcasters or young students may not want to do or don't feel like it's important. You started as the behind the scenes spot in your early years in your freshman year, where so many other people may say, I want to be on the camera. I want to be the presenter. I want to be the reporter. I want the camera in front of. But almost that experience of you finding out what happened behind the scenes, do you feel like it made you better in front of the camera?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Watching people be the on-air folks and, watching the way that they kind of controlled the conversation. And then, like I said, this was a really loose kind of program. They'd go off on tangents. We'd go off and talk. If we started on one thing, it's like eventually we'd find our way to the second thing. But, it might have been like, oh, we had 5 things on the rundown for that day, and we only got to 3 of them because, my co-anchor had some crazy opinion. And I looked at her and said, what are you talking about? We got to, all right, throw out the rundown. We got to talk about this some more. So yeah, it was incredibly, incredibly beneficial to to do that. And then, in addition to doing TMA, it's like all my regular broadcast classes. I think the first news package I ever turned was about the town of Hamden, where Quinnipiac is located. They started single stream recycling. So, like I did a stand up where I was like, this is a number 5 recyclable. This is a number 7. Now they can go together. And it was all about shooting those creative stand-ups and putting together a resume tape and things like that. And that's what, eventually got me into Boston, which was, again, working behind the scenes. And I'm so, so thankful that I was able to start there, learning how to write versus, just jumping into an on-air gig.
Before we get into that Boston, that writing gig, I got to follow up on a picture I saw from you on social media. I immediately reached out to you because I thought there was some Photoshop going on. I needed to hear the story. And unfortunately, as important as this career stuff is for young broadcasters and people hopefully finding out more about you here locally, I know there are some people who are just coming for this story involving you in Barstool Sports' Dave Portnoy at Jack Lamson, CBS 6 on Twitter. You tweeted this out because Dave Portnoy said, I'm paraphrasing at this point, something along the lines of, this guy single-handedly got us to come to Quinnipiac. Please, Jack, tell us the story of what is the infancy at this point of Barstool Sports and your relationship with Dave Portnoy a decade plus ago, right? 2011 we're looking at?
Yeah, we're looking at 2010, so even a little bit longer ago. And you want to talk about its infancy. This is pre-podcast. This is... he's launched his first foray into college concerts, pre-blackout tour. The thing that everybody sort of recognizes Barstool for on the college circuit. They were bringing around Sammy Adams, who is a Boston-based rapper.
Hobart Colleges before he transferred over to the Massachusetts. My alma mater, Hobart, and then he played soccer and then went to your Massachusetts spot over. That's right.
Yep. So he came out with the I Hate College remix after Asher Roth's I Love College. And so Dave was doing an internet radio show, like the kind of thing where you just like had to live stream it. God, I don't even know what app they used, but you used to just click on a link and you could listen to Dave talk and then you could call in. And so he had this Stoolapalooza tour planned, and I should have worn the shirt. I still have it. They had the tour planned. They were going to all these big schools, a lot of New England-based schools. I don't think it left New England. If anything, like maybe down to the Mid-Atlantic. But so he was back and forth. He said, should we go to UConn or should we go to Quinnipiac? Now, by all means, UConn is a far better party school than Quinnipiac. I mean, it's bigger, better sports. I mean, I don't think anybody even at Quinnipiac would argue that, UConn is a better party school. And as a grad, I don't have a problem saying that. But a buddy of mine named Matt Durgan, he lived on my hallway freshman year. We lived together for the next 3 years. He was in my wedding. We decided to launch this campaign, bring the stool to New Haven. And so we lived in a suite. This was our junior year, and we had these big windows that overlooked Dorm Road. And so we, on individual pieces of paper, printed out singular letters that said, bring the stool to New Haven. And we taped them up on the window on our little patio. And we got frat bros, of which I was one, and sorority girls to come and take pictures in front of it. This was all on Facebook too. I mean, like Facebook and like very, very early Twitter. Like it was, not like we were posting to Instagram or anything like that. So we called into the show and we were like, Dave, we're running this Quinnipiac campaign. You gotta come. You gotta come. You gotta come. And lo and behold, we had a better push than they did. And he wound up coming to Toad's place, the I guess the go-to Quinnipiac bar for sure. And he reached out and said, hey, you guys did this, get your crew together and you can come and do the pre-party with us. You can come and ride the limo bus, to Toad's and come to the party. And you guys all have free tickets. So we did. And then, like I said, early Barstool, this was Jenna Marbles was running around the place. I played beer pong against Prez and Sales Guy, and they absolutely wiped us off the table. We didn't score. They skunked us. He was a great guy. We had a conversation with him when we got there, and he was like, "Guys, this is really cool. I appreciate you putting in all the work and all the effort to do this." And so I run into him at the track. It's the first time I've seen him since Quinnipiac, and people were stopping to take pictures with him and whatnot. He was at the $50 minimum window, big bets all over the place, looking sharp in his full suit and everything. And I go, "Hey, Dave," and he goes, "Yeah," and he's kind of looking over my shoulder. And I should say this first: the concert coincided with the spring planning board, our little party committee at school. They brought the Fray in for their spring concert, and it wound up being the same weekend. So we made shirts juvenilely that said, "The Fray is soft, the stool is hard." And so Dave's looking over my shoulder, just going, another kid that wants to take a picture, whatever. And I look at him, I go, "Dave, Fray is soft, stool is hard, Quinnipiac, 2010. And he stopped in his tracks. And he kind of did a double take, and he goes, "No way." I was like, yeah, Jack Lamson. You probably don't remember me, but, I was one of the guys who orchestrated the Quinnipiac trip. And he goes, yeah, I remember. I was with my father-in-law. It was opening day at the track. He goes, "Are you guys going to be standing here for a while?" And I said, yeah, we'll be here. He goes, great. We got, he asked me for a picture, which I thought was kind of crazy. And I was like, "Dave, I have my phone. Do you want to just take a picture?" And he goes, yeah. You can just text it to me. And so we took a picture, and I handed him my phone, and he put in a number. I would hope that a guy like Dave has like some kind of like a Dropbox account or something like that, where like, I don't know if I actually have Dave Portnoy's cell phone or not. I haven't decided to, flirt with that yet. Yeah, he texted the picture and then put that up later. He wrote in a blog after the concert, "No two people have been more responsible for bringing the stool to a school than Jack Lamson and Matt Durgan." And we printed that out and framed it and put it on our wall because we were juniors in college. It was an absolute blast, a cool time. And it was cool to see him remember that all those years later. Because I think he said in the tweet something about like, OG stoolies or something like that. Like, we were reading the blog, and it's like these days I listen to all the, the top rated podcasts, the Part of My Takes, the Lights Camera Barstools, and the guys like that, KFC Radio. But like, I don't read the blog all that much anymore, but it's like, I'm still involved with those guys a little bit, I guess, and just consuming their media, and, I enjoy it.
I still want to get to the Boston thing, and that story is better than I thought it was going to be, which is awesome. And I know the Stooley is now here in the Capital Region in upstate New York. At Jack Lamson, CBS6, you're probably going to get some more followers and some more takes from a younger audience now. But I was going to save this for later, but I think it's the perfect time to do it now. You are in what I would call traditional media as an occupation right now. Are you fascinated by the way in which Dave has done this in a non-traditional media setting, of the ways in which Barstool has found an audience? Because I feel like you, maybe of anybody, has a great understanding of this balance between traditional versus non-traditional media outlets.
Yeah, I think what they've done is incredible. I mean, you talk about building up a podcast network and building just a great readership. It's like, I remember when they launched like Barstool LA, And it was like, other than Chicago, Philly, New York, it was like their first foray into like, another big city, that was like outside of the Northeast kind of, and watching it just absolutely crash and burn. But their willingness to try anything and their ability to just go for it. I mean, why not? Let's give it a shot. Even if it doesn't work, we'll write it off as a loss, and we'll try again with another city, another format, under something like that. So, yeah. And what I appreciated about it is that, and what I think a lot of people don't understand, the thing that I try and remind myself and tell myself, because I don't understand or agree with everything they do. I don't agree with every post, but I mean, they've got 150 content employees now, give or take, and it's like, when are you ever going to be in a room and agree with something that 150 people ever say? I think the biggest thing with that is that you consume what you want to consume, and whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't mean that you I don't fully endorse everything that Dave's ever said. I don't fully endorse everything that KFC's ever said. It's like, sometimes people, but it's not one size fits all. It's not like an all or nothing. It's like, I can consume bits of media here and enjoy them, and I can, ignore bits of media over here because I don't really like them, or, it's like, it's not a catch-all, I guess, is what I think.
There's the gods of thunder and storm. The critics of Barstool have now invaded where Jack is taping right now. So, yeah. So if you hear some buzzing in your headphones, that might be the rain coming down. So don't feel like you have to adjust your volume. With that being said, let's get into the story about Boston. You graduated. Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead. Yeah. Close that up. Go ahead.
With editing and stuff like that. Sorry. Do you want me to head inside so it's not an issue?
No, you know what? Leave it like this. I kind of like how this is. I kind of like the raw and authentic. I think Dave Portnoy, if anybody, would appreciate how we're doing this. So I'm going to let it fly. Let's go into no doubt. Let's go into
out in the brewery garage.
Yes, which don't worry. I saw that. That's another reason why I want you to stay in the garage, because nothing's better on our visual side than actually seeing the brewery garage. Boston is a writer. You graduate from Quinnipiac. How in the world do you land this gig?
So I graduated from Quinnipiac 2011. I went back to go work at the summer camp that I had been going to and working at for 12, 13 years, something like that. It's right across from my family's place up in Maine, Winona Camps. Awesome experience there. I still have family who are involved there to this day. But the whole time that I was working there, working with kids, teaching them sailing, I was applying to whatever I could get. I mean, I had my resume reel from college, but I had a family friend who was at NBC Boston, WHDH, and offered to kind of pass my resume along, and they brought me in as a writer. And I said, I still got this camp thing I'm doing, and I'm 21 years old. I don't really want to give this up quite yet. So I told him I could work a couple of days a week. And then after camp was up in August, I hung on to my childhood for as long as I can. And then I went to go work 5 days a week on the morning shift. I think I got in at 1 and worked until about 11:30, noon or so, something like that. And I was a writer, and in the Boston market, they were tasking me with, the entertainment block and, kind of, at least in the beginning, kind of more mundane stories. And, they'd give me a 45-second copy from the AP or from one of the wire services. And they'd be like, I need this to be 15 seconds. And I was like, cool, let me just cut out literally everything. But it taught me how to write quick, concise, clean stories. I'll never forget, when I talk about learning lessons in a small market, it's why I think everybody should start in a small market. So this is 2012, probably. I said that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were married, and they weren't at that point. And I got absolutely reamed out. I got you got a basic fact wrong. I had the anchor, I had the producer, the executive producer, all of them just on top of me, furious that this is a story that if the show started, it was like a 5 a.m. show, it probably hit at like 5:24, something like that. Like the last block of the show, nobody really cares. It was called the Hollywood Minute. And, but it was a great lesson in, you got to get the little stuff right. You got to get it all right. You got to, if you're going to put out something, it's like you have to make sure that you have even the most mundane of facts right.
And just by the way, to follow up on that, for those who might get confused, when you're talking about writing, they may hear the term writing maybe for the website because it's 2021 now. People might get, you're writing for prompter. So there's somebody who reads that. I do this all the time with the television anchors who join us. I always go to Anchorman as my first comparison. I don't know why, but it's what it is. Like, I have this vision of Ron Burgundy with the question mark. So some anchor may have read your copy, got it wrong. It reflects on them, and that's why you're getting screamed at, because they, although live, didn't click in their head to change your copy on the fly. That's what you're doing because that's the spot you've been put in, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, yes, you're getting screamed at, but when you make this transition to on-air at Wichita Falls, Texas, you are very aware of what could be coming when you move to that role. So take us through that situation where you go from writer to back on your first on-air hiring out in Texas.
Yeah, very much so. That was, like you said, that was the exact reason, was because, ideally every anchor gets a chance to look over their scripts before they read it. Nobody wants to do a cold read, but in the way that it was happening, especially in a market like Boston, everything's happening so quickly. And especially with those mundane stories, you don't expect there to really be an error like that. You expect them to just kind of be fluff. And that's what they were supposed to be. But so I used my time in Boston, and I, got cozy with a couple of reporters and got them to take me out on stories with them. And they'd take me out and, they'd kind of let me shoot my own stand-ups, shoot my own stuff. And then, for a, 6-pack of beer, I'd buy them lunch or something like that. The editors would work with me, and I'd take all the raw footage and the stand-ups that I did and make my own story out of it. And that became my reel. And I learned a ton from that. And that's what landed me my first gig in Wichita Falls, Texas. A one phone interview, and then a job offer for something like $17,000 a year to come down and be a 5-day-a-week reporter. And my dad and I packed up all my stuff, moved to Texas, drove through some tornadoes. I lived in a $600 a month apartment by myself. My folks moved me down, and right before I left, there was an anchor in Boston who told me, the news got out that I was leaving. And oh gosh, I'm gonna have to think of her name. But she looked at me and she said, "You will never have as much fun as you do in your first TV market." She goes, "You're all making shit pay. You're all going to go out together. You're going to drink at night. You're going to wake up and you're going to do the news together the next morning." And that's exactly what it was. Nobody who was there, aside from the legacy anchors, the guys who did the 6 p.m. and the 11 p.m. and stuff like that, they were lifers, kind of. Like, they probably weren't going anywhere. But for the most part, everybody who was there as a starter market. And so we were all in the same boat. None of us were natives. None of us wanted to stay. We were all just looking for a stepping stone. And so we were all looking for friends, and I think that process, that experience was absolutely invaluable. I mean, my experience with those people, I'm still close with a couple of them to this day. Just because, it felt a little bit like being in the trenches, like we were down in this foreign land. I mean, people from Rhode Island, Florida, LA, Arizona, Cronkite grads, you would think could jump into a top 50 market. And it's like, nah, here we are in Wichita Falls, Texas, literally tumbleweed country, in between Dallas and Oklahoma City. It's like, oh, if we want to go out to eat tonight, are we going to Fridays, Applebee's, or Olive Garden?
Well, Jack, at least you have a good attitude going in about it, because you get that advice from one of your former coworkers that you're going to have fun and you're going to have this experience, because it could have been very easy for someone who's in their early 20s like you, who is leaving Massachusetts, your home state, who's leaving Boston, which you hear Boston as a kid who wants to be in television or in media, you're working there. You're making less than $18,000 a year. There could have been so many people your age that said, I'm not doing that. I'm not leaving. Like, I'm good right here. And as much as I've heard from other anchors in your field that have had horror stories in their first job, and you could easily get discouraged. And it seems as if having that positive attitude going into it maybe tempered the discouragement of what could have been for so many other young anchors.
Oh, definitely. And don't get me wrong, there were struggles. I mean, like, I made my own mic flag. Like I had a tiny little, like, parabolic microphone. And we didn't have any mic flags. And I'm sticking this microphone in the mayor of Wichita Falls' face, and it's like, it doesn't have a 6 on it anywhere. And I'm like, guys, how do we not have mic flags? What are we doing? And so I made my own. I got my own little square with some foam inside, and I printed out a 6, and I had my own personal mic flag. Nobody else could use it because I made it. It was mine, and I still have it. But it was, don't get me wrong, there were struggles for sure. I missed home like crazy. I was still dating my now wife at the time, and she didn't come down to Texas with me. She had just moved to Boston. She said, I know that you're going to be there temporarily. We knew what we were getting into. So I think I did 14 months down there, something like that. And, she came down to visit me a handful of times, and that's what we did. It sucked. Don't get me wrong. But when I went into it with the attitude like that this is temporary. I'm going to learn a lot. And I did. I learned a ton. But I also treated it as like a chance to experience a new place. Like I went to a rodeo. I ate rattlesnake. I shot guns on a ranch. Like, I had an absolute great time. Chili cook-offs. I mean, you name it. I did everything Texas that I could. And then, I got my first taste of like real big news coverage with the West Texas fertilizer plant explosion. We had a sister station down in Waco, and I had a couple of beers, and my news director called me and said, hey, our sister station down in Waco needs bodies to help cover this fertilizer plant explosion that killed, I want to say, like a dozen firefighters or something like that, and a couple of people. It was terrible. And so I threw the Keurig on and said, I'll hop in the car. And I listened to the radio coverage of it on the way down. And then I worked for 26 hours straight. I got in there at like 4:00 in the morning. They were in wall-to-wall coverage, and they had me piece together something. I hopped on the desk, told them what I had learned. And then the next day they sent me out to go find a story. And we drove past a rest stop with all of the network news coverage that was down there, all the satellite trucks and everything. And we found a guy a mile away whose windows had been shattered by this explosion. And so I profiled him and talked about that. And that was my story. And by 6 a.m. the next morning, I said, all right. They said, okay, you're done. And to my station's credit at the time, they got me a hotel room and said, get some sleep.
26 hours straight in a market that's not your market, but you did it. You grind. You get not only to be a more well-rounded reporter and anchor, you get to be a more well-rounded person, having these culture changes you just didn't grow up with. All these things happen in such a short window, 14 months. But then you go from Texas to Myrtle Beach. Take us through that process of how that opening happens. Is it the standard application process? How do you end up? And again, we could say there's another culture shock. We're talking Massachusetts to Texas to Myrtle Beach.
The Redneck Riviera. I hold Myrtle Beach in high esteem. I love it. They had a job opening for a weekend anchor and a 3-day-a-week reporter, and I found it. I applied. And I'll never forget, they called me and I did a phone interview. I did a phone interview in Boston, actually. I was up visiting friends and family, and I did my phone interview. And they called me back a day later and said, hey, we want to fly you out for an interview. And I said, fly me out where? What do you mean? What does fly me for an interview mean? Because remember, in Texas, I did a a one phone interview. And I was like, you want to fly me somewhere on your dime and you want to interview me in person? Like it was so foreign. I was like, this is crazy. So they interview me for that job. You know, they fly me in, they put me right on the water. I mean, it was very, very cool. Great spot, great station. The news director, Victoria Spechko, is still one of my all-time favorite people that I've ever worked with in news. They had a couple of legacy anchors, and Tim McGinnis, who's now a state senator in South Carolina, and Allison Floyd, and Ed Piotrowski, who's like best friends with Jim Cantori. You know, and he's been in the industry for, I think, 27, 28 years now. So, you know, I was like, I'm going to cover a hurricane. Like, this is going to be so cool. I love it. And I go up there and they show me around, and I was like, again, I knew that it wasn't going to be permanent. I even just from my interview and from seeing the area, I was like, boy, I'm really, much like Texas, I'm really going to miss changes in elevation. Like, I'm a mountain kid. I love being around mountains and lakes and stuff like that. But I was like, hell, I could go live by the ocean for a couple of years. Why not? You know, that sounds great. Maybe I can convince my wife or my girlfriend at the time to move in with me. Wouldn't that be nice? And so I packed it up and I moved to Myrtle Beach, and I moved into a place that was, I'll never forget, my brother and I drove from, my younger brother and I drove from Texas to Myrtle Beach, and we pull into my new house that I was renting, a little 2-bedroom place, 3 blocks from the beach in downtown Myrtle. And we go out for dinner. My folks met us there. They flew down, and we come back from dinner, and there's, I mean, a dozen police cars and a SWAT vehicle across the street. And we asked one of the cops what's going on. He's like, oh, big drug bust. And my mother is mortified, absolutely mortified. She's like, and I didn't find out about this until years later. She called the Myrtle Beach police to ask about the area that I was living in. And then lo and behold, 2.5 years later, I wound up interviewing the cop, and he goes, Lamson, you sound familiar. I was like, I don't think we've ever met. He goes, I spoke to your mom. She called me when you moved to the area. Yes, I mean, talk about your credibility going out the window. I mean, oh my God, I was mortified. But yeah, so I lived on the edge of a rough area in Myrtle Beach. My golf clubs got stolen out of the back of my car. But I woke up every morning and I rode my bike to the beach, and I had coffee and read my book on the beach. At that point, I was working nightside. And I loved it. It was awesome. And then 2 months in, the morning anchor, I still don't know to this day if they didn't renew his contract or he left. Depends on who you ask. And I never got the straight story. But anyway, he was out. And the girl who was still there, Crystal Costa, I went into my news director and said, and this is if I could give any piece of advice to anybody, it would be this. I went into my news director, Victoria, and I said, hey, listen, I know I just got here, but I think that 6 months from now, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I was interested in that morning anchor job. I want to try for it. Like, I know you signed me for this. You want me to do this, but like, I'm here. And I was a weekend morning anchor in Texas. I kind of passed over that, but I did do some weekend anchoring down in Texas. And I was like, I want you to give me a shot. And to her credit, she said, great, absolutely, we'll give you a shot. And they did. And they let me kind of audition for it. And then probably the most stressful time in my entire career was when I was doing weekend evening anchor. So I was there till 11 p.m. or no, till midnight, probably on Sunday, off Monday, Tuesday, and then in at 3 a.m. on Wednesday. So Friday afternoon would roll around, I'd be done at noon on Friday, and I'd have to be in Saturday, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to do the weekend evening show. So that was a crazy, crazy time. And then eventually they made me full-time weekday anchor, but it was a really, really weird time doing both.
That word, by the way, you keep saying is time. If people are hearing 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, they know you from CBS here in Albany, up at Wild Times. I'm sure it's the question you get the most often when you wake up, all that stuff. I don't even want to ask it at this point because you've done it your whole career. Like, you're so used to the mornings. You've been all over the place with your sleep schedule and everything else. But just quickly back to that pressure you're talking about, because so many people, whether, again, is the start of your career, maybe you're halfway through your broadcasting career, that internal pressure of, I know somebody's watching me. I used to try to tell people this as advice, that if you're hosting a radio show or a podcast or television anchoring, whatever it might be, I used to say, giving a speech at a wedding, just assume nobody's listening, nobody's watching. Because when you start to think about that, that's when it starts getting in your mind that, oh, I made a mistake and everyone saw it. Did you feel like, you said it's the most pressure in your career? What helped you get over that pressure of making sure you still put on great casts every single night?
It wasn't always easy. My second or third weekend in Myrtle Beach, the show was starting with these tread cameras, and they would kind of come up like this and say hello to you. And so I'm coming up at 6 p.m. on a Saturday or Sunday, and I said, good evening, Myrtle Beach. I'm Jack Lamson. It's got up to 80 degrees today. It turned into a pretty damn nice day out there. Thanks for watching. And I just all the color drained out of my face. And the show that's on out, it's like NCIS or something, or The Bachelor that's on after us, on a Sunday night. It's like, they're saying things that are far worse, but I'm mortified. I'm brand new there. And I know it's the South. You certainly can't say damn on television. And, to his credit, our general manager texted the news director and said, would you kindly remind our new anchor that he can't say damn on Southern television? And I called my news director. She was like, Jack, it's okay. It's okay. You're fine. Just don't do it again. I said, yes, no, I will not do it again. I promise I will not do it again. But like I said, yeah, the stress was there for that. For me, I think it was the idea that, they had told me and they lived up to their word. They when they gave me that double duty of the weekends and the mornings, they said, we're going to make you the morning anchor. And Victoria told me when I started, she said, we did invest in you as the weekend anchor. We branded you, we've shot promos, you've done. So we're not just going to throw somebody in as a fill-in. You're going to have to do this weekend gig until we find somebody who can do it. So for me, it was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, that helped to get me through it, knowing that that at some point I would be the full-time weekday anchor. Because I knew they wanted me to do it. I knew that Crystal, my co-anchor, wanted me to do it. So I knew they were going to get me there. It was just, and I understood their dilemma, needing to get somebody in there and making sure that they didn't just kind of move me without any kind of explanation or without having a solution in place. And they did it, and they did a great job.
Well, let's go through this transition now, because you're making these moves in Myrtle Beach. It's an exciting part of your career because you're getting better again here at this point. You're finding out that just asking sometimes is the best advice you can give. How do you end up? Yeah. How do you end up in the Capital Region now?
So I wound up looking for Myrtle Beach is owned by Sinclair, same thing as CBS 6. And so I'm looking at the internal transfer portal, and they had a weekend, or I'm sorry, they had a anchor spot open on the morning. They wanted to transition Julia and Ed O'Brien into a 3-anchor team. And so I applied, told my news director, and she said, you have my complete 100% blessing. For reference, obviously I said I'm from Boston, 3 hours east. My wife is from the Finger Lakes, 3 hours, a little less west. So Albany, seemed like a really, really great spot. That was always the goal, to get closer to home. And, like I said, I knew everything would be temporary. So that's where we went. And when I interviewed, they told me that Ed was sick. And they said, we don't know what this is going to be, for you. We don't know when Ed is coming back. We don't know, what kind of position you'll be in when you come. And I said, okay. And I flew out for an interview. They flew me in, and I said, hey, if it's all right with you, I'm not going to stay in a hotel. I have a college buddy I can stay with who lives in Clifton Park. And so they said, we don't have to pay for it. Great. So they flew me up. I stayed with him. He took me to the track, showed me around, and I loved the place. And so I signed on, and then I believe in the time in between when I signed and when I started is when Ed passed away. Obviously a Capital Region broadcasting legend, and I had a real fear that I was going to be taken as Ed's replacement, which I guess when you look at it, from a 10,000 yard view, I kind of was, but we tried really hard to make people aware that that was not the intention, that they hadn't hired me a month prior to Ed passing, and that, they were planning for his passing or anything like that, So I did, on my first day, I did an interview with Liz Bishop. Now, talk about somebody to introduce you, it's a great way into the area. So I did an interview with her, and we made it very clear, Jack was supposed to be the 3. He was supposed to be, complimentary to Julia and Ed and, round out the team. And then Melissa Lee wound up doing that beautifully. And, but it was a challenge to say being in his shadow is probably too strong, because I never really felt that. Nobody ever made me feel like I was stepping into, shoes that I wasn't ready to fill or anything like that. But, all the credit to Julia Dunn too, because she welcomed me with open arms and was like, I'm happy to have you here. I'm happy to have a co-anchor, and, we get along phenomenally.
It's almost as if you guys are writing your own book, and Ed is a Titan, a legend in this area, no doubt. But at some point, a new book begins, a new chapter begins, and credit to you and your teammates and your colleagues, Julia, Melissa, and Alyssa, because when you tune in the Capital Region, for you guys in the mornings, there is something that puts a smile on people's faces in the morning when maybe they don't want to be up that early. How did you four in particular have this chemistry? And I'm not just talking on the air. I'm talking on social media, feeling like you're laughing, pulling jokes on. There seems like a true chemistry between you four across the board.
We're friends outside of work, I would say, is the easiest way to do it. I mean, my daughter and son hang out with Melissa's daughter. We see Julia outside of work and her wife, Erin, all the time. I'll never forget when I knew that I'd be friends with Julia was I made a reference to the movie Independence Day. And I think I said something, something very quotable from the movie, like, that's what I call a close encounter or something like that. And Julia looked at me and goes, "You idiot, Lucas's field is on the other side of town," which is such a stupid, mundane line from that movie that I did a double take, and I was like, who references that? But she's a wild animal. I love that woman. She's, she and I just jive. We hit it off when it comes to, and we hit it off with movies, and we love making Alyssa realize that she hasn't watched any movies ever. So, we like tossing to her. Like she reacts to things the way that my brother and I will reference movies will be the way that Julia and I do. And then my dad will look at us and be like, "I don't know what you guys are talking about." And we'll throw it to Alyssa and be like, "Alyssa, remember that time in, Gone in 60 Seconds?" And she's like, "I've never seen that movie." But we have a great back and forth with it. And it's like, "Oh, Alyssa, come on." And, we do genuinely have a good time. It's so phenomenal post-COVID, at this point in COVID, I guess I should say, to be sitting back next to her, because just the interaction is not there. You can't have that relationship with somebody from across a room. It stinks.
Maybe also what helps them is some beers from the Lamson Brewery. I don't know whether or not they drink or not, but I know, and if you're watching on our YouTube side, we've got a fun setting you've got for us. Take us through Lamson Brewery, what you're making, how this... I have so many questions. I'll just let you kind of take the floor here about how this all began, because this is a true, real business you got going on here.
I moved into my senior year house in 2000, and at that point it's 2010, in the fall of 2010, and I had a U-Haul full of all of my belongings to move into a house for senior year. And I walked upstairs into this house, and a guy named Mike Brandman, who had been my roommate for 4 years. He was my freshman year roommate, and we stuck together. He said, "Hey, I got a beer brewing kit. You want to try it?" And I said, "Forget the U-Haul. Let's make some beer." And I never looked back. So that was 11 years ago. And now I've got a real brew system. I've got a couple of beers entered in competition. This will be after the event, but we've got the Southern Vermont homebrew competition coming up this Saturday the 7th. So we'll be out there for that. I'm the defending champion for best brewer.
Whoa!
Yeah, that was March of 2020. Right when COVID started, March of 2020. Right when everything started to kick off, and it was sort of a joke at that point. No, you don't want to catch the thing that you've got on the cruise ships. Fortunately at that point hadn't made it yet, but everybody was kind of using hand sanitizer, but nobody was in masks. But we won best brewery at that, and so we've got 6 or 7 beers that we're going to bring this Saturday, and looking forward to hopefully defending the title. But yeah, it'd be a cool career to jump into at some point. What I'd like to do somewhere down the line.
Besides showcases and events and tastings, I can't DM you on social media and just have you ship it to me yet. We're not at that level. Not me personally, but just like anybody listening to the podcast.
We're at the point where I haven't checked the law specifically.
Okay.
I think they frown upon shipping alcohol. But if you wanted to maybe arrange a meetup in the Clifton Park area, and make a donation, I think I could probably hook some folks up.
Well done. That's a very good answer. It's as if you take media for profession. Very good, right? There. Yes, very good. Take us here.
I'll show you the brew setup quickly.
This is what we need more of on the Getting There with Goz visual sides. The walking camera, the tour of the house. Oh, look at the logo right there. Oh my goodness, look at this. This is incredible. I did not know what to expect. It looks better than I even could have imagined. This is the real deal out here.
We got the logo, and we got a real system. So it's that can make about 15 gallons of beer at a time, or 3 of those tall, skinny kegs, that kind of thing. So that was the major upgrade last year. And then we've got a couple of fermenters, that'll turn everything out. And then we've got a couple of beers on tap. This one's supposed to come with me to the competition, but if I keep, drinking it, then
are you pouring this right now? Look at this. Look at this action I'm getting. What is this called?
This is we call our sour series our Don't Knock It, because we find that more often than not, folks, some folks are into sour beer, but not everybody. And ours is kind of on the mild end of the sour scale. So we call it Don't Knock It, like don't knock it till you try it. But this is our Don't Knock It Blueberry Blackberry Ale.
An OG stoolie who worked in Wichita Falls, who was in the drug area of Myrtle Beach, who's come back here 3 hours west of his Massachusetts home state to anchor the morning news at Wild Times while he's a home brewer. Jack Lamson, I could talk to you for another hour. I don't even know if I did a good enough job interviewing you with all the follow-ups you've left me with, but I'll close with this. The best advice for young broadcasters, when we're talking about either earlier in their careers or just leaving school, to get where you are, we're going to focus just on the TV anchoring, although we probably could take this in a bunch of different branches if we wanted. Just at your professional CBS job right now, how do you get to where you are?
I would say the biggest thing, it goes back to Myrtle Beach, and it goes back to another story that I'll tell right now, is ask. Ask, and don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing they can do is say no. when I was an intern at Quinnipiac. I interned at WTNH, News Channel 8. It was the only TV station located out of New Haven, Connecticut, near where Quinnipiac was. And they sent me out with a reporter a couple of different times, guys who, if you have any listeners and watchers in Connecticut, people will know the name Jamie Muro and Bob Wilson. And Bob Wilson took me out to a fire, kind of just a straightforward fire, nobody hurt, anything like that, but a home burned down. And we hop out of the car, and Bob turns to me and hands me the microphone and says, "Here you go." And he let me do the interview. He let me interview the fire chief. And, I asked all the questions I thought I should ask, and I looked at Bob, and Bob asked one or two that he thought I had missed, but he let me try it. And then, so that wasn't necessarily an ask, but it was what you do is you ask, can I shoot a stand-up? If you're out with a professional as an intern, especially as an intern, hey, can I shoot a stand-up? Hey, would you mind if I, and then, you have to feel everybody out, see what's going to happen. But most of the time they're willing to help. There's people who are willing to help you out there, and they want to see you succeed. So a big part of it was that. Similar to that story, Bob Wilson and I went to UConn right after Jim Calhoun had come back after being ill. And he was back on the sideline, and we were in the basement at UConn. This is perfect. We're tying it full circle to UConn. We're in the basement of UConn, and outside the locker room, they have a wall of every NBA player who's ever played at UConn. And so I'm in the basement. Jim Calhoun has just come back. Bob's done his story already. We interviewed a couple students about coach coming back and, what it was going to mean for the program. And so Bob goes, "All right, go ahead and go do your stand-up." And I said, "All right, I'm Jack Lamson here, alongside a wall of memorable NBA faces. But behind them all is head coach Jim Calhoun, who's back on the sideline. Fans are excited to have him back. Here's what they had to say about it." And while I'm doing this, I had heard a door open behind me. But in my head, I said, I'm not going to let that bother me. I'm going to focus. I'm going to show them that I can do this. I'm going to, not let that throw me off. And as I'm doing it, I finish up. Bob goes, "Come here." I go back to the camera. He rewinds it. And sure as shit, it was Jim Calhoun who walked out right behind me and was right over my shoulder. And he looked at me like, I could make this kid's day and stop. Nah. And he kept walking. So I had a chance to potentially, maybe I should have had better situational awareness. But I was, elbow to elbow with Jim Calhoun and didn't realize it. But that was a good example of just being in the moment. Find a reporter. If you're an intern, find a reporter who you like, somebody who you think is willing to work with you, buy him lunch and say, hey, can you take me out with you sometime? I'd like to learn. If you're a young reporter, something like that, ask for feedback. Don't wait for feedback, ask for it. Go into your boss, to your news director, to your executive producer and say, hey, I've got these 3 stories. I'd like you to look at them, and tell me what you think I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well. When I got to Texas after writing in Boston, they said, Jack, your packages are all coming in at like 56 seconds. Do you think you could tell a little bit more of a story? And it was because I was used to condensing things so tight that I had sort of lost that narrative. So they asked me to, expand a little bit, which is, if anybody in news is listening, that, most of the time everybody's like tight, but they were like, give it a little bit of breathing room, tell a story. And so you'll find yourself fluctuating based on what you're doing. But that's, I guess that's the gist of it, is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for suggestions, and don't be afraid to ask, period. Because again, if they've already hired you, and this goes back to negotiating too, they've already said that they want to hire you. Worst thing they're going to do is say no. If you ask for something, they're not going to say, now we don't want to hire you. They're just going to say no. And that's okay.
if you're up early in the capital region, make sure you're watching CBS 6. The great chemistry, the fun, the enjoying things that are happening, the laughs and more. Jack, I appreciate you spending some time with me. Continue the great work over at CBS 6, and hopefully very soon I'll be heading over to Clifton Park and be grabbing some of your beers very soon.
The garage is open, guys.
I appreciate it, my friend. Take care.
You as well.